Hey, good evening and welcome everyone to Studio W, the Buzz, the Global Radio Network. And we circle the globe 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with some of the finest programs you can find anywhere around the world. And as usual on Sundays, it's the Boomerang Radio Show. I'm proud of this broadcast because we bring on panelists and also topics that you want to talk about, things that's important to you. Got a special guest on tonight, but I'm going to bring on my panelists first. That is Mike Ward, aka Mad Mike from the Mad Mike and Wild Will Coast to Coast show, and Mr. T. Air Van Meter, panelist on the Groove Swing Speaks radio show. Got a special guest, as I mentioned before, and this is a gentleman that I've grown to be fond of because I love what he does, and that is Mr. Peter Rachleff. And before I bring him on, let me tell you a little bit about this gentleman. Peter Rachleff has spent the last 45 years exploring the intersections of race and class in the development of the United States, from our economy, politics, and popular culture. Okay, these concerns have driven his research, writing, teaching, and activism. In 1981, he earned his PhD in history from the University of Pittsburgh, writing his dissertation about the development of the working class in Richmond, Virginia, my hometown. That's where I am now, from 1865 to 1890. This became the basis for his book, Black Labor in Richmond, Virginia, 1865 to 1890. Was published in hardcover by Temple University Press in 1984 and in paperback by the University of Illinois Press in 1989. From 1982 to 2012, Peter taught labor, immigration, and African American history at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota. And in 2014, with his partner, Beth Clary, co-founded the East Side Freedom Library with the mission to inspire solidarity for work justice and advocate for the equity of all. Peter has also published books on postal workers, the Hormel strike in 1985 to 1986, and the unionism of food service workers, and he has published articles in 10 books and more than a dozen journals. All right, welcome to the set, Peter. Welcome back, my friend.
Thank you, Brother William. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I'm excited when you agreed to come back. I said, man, as a matter of fact, I'd love to have you back because I'm an advocate for education and also history. And we have so many people out here that's putting out information, false information, disinformation. And it's great to have someone that has done this for a living, that's speaking the truth, researching and actually bringing the truth. And so thank you so much. So I see Mad Mike is here and T Air. Hey guys, thank you so much. Peter, today you want to focus on DEI and unions. And I'm glad that you're bringing this up because DEI has been given a bad name. And it is insulting to me for people to throw around the word DEI. Because you're black or brown or you're a woman, they're saying you only got that because of you were this, that, or the other. And I'd like for you to put that to bed because, like I said, it's insulting. Because these people who are in these jobs, they have done this not because of their skin color or where they came from. It's because they worked hard to get in those positions. And so I'd like for you to clarify that and also get into the meat of the conversation as far as DEI and how important it is in the workforce and in labor.
So it's interesting that we're having this conversation today when this morning the New York Times, in their Sunday edition, which is probably one of the best sold newspapers in the country, on page 1, above the fold, as they say in the newspaper world, ran an article about how President Trump has been firing African Americans in leadership positions in the military, in the government. The article focused on this brother who was just fired from the Surface Transportation Board, which oversees railroad regulations, railroad mergers. So this is an issue which is very timely, so to speak. But I'm interested in talking about more broadly than DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, to talk about racism and anti-racism, and the roles that racism has played in the development of the American labor movement, and the ways that union activists and some union leaders in recent years have been introducing strategies, tactics, internal union rules to try to transcend the legacy that racism has passed on in the shaping of the American working class and the shaping of the American labor movement. So, I would be very happy to talk about some specific stories about how, how this has been a challenge, and how at times and in places uh, labor organizations, unions have transcended those challenges and built a solidaristic movement, a movement where workers of color and white workers, workers of immigrant backgrounds and workers born in the US, male workers and female workers have united together to build strength and solidarity. That's what I'm always looking for, how to find those examples, how to analyze them, talk about uh, how they transcended one of the ways that I like to think is the idea that Karl Marx once said, men make history, but not on their own terms. And I like to say, history deals us a hand of cards. We can't control what's in that hand of cards, but we can control how we choose to play those cards. And I want to look at the ways that working people in unions have chosen to play the cards handed to them by history in order to build interracial solidarity. And I know we only have 2 hours. I could tell stories till the cows come home and beyond about how solidarity has been built in the past. So we can start wherever you might like, William.
Yes, where I like to start is DEI and the positive influence it has had in this country and around the globe. Because in your book, when you talk about black labor in Richmond, Virginia, you would talk about how blacks and whites got together and they were on the track of building something, and it was positive. And can you talk about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our society and in the workplace, and how companies that have initiated DEI programs, they are far more profitable and successful than companies that poo-poo it and say no.
Well, one of the things that we've discovered here on the east side of St. Paul is this is a community that has been reshaped many times over by the arrival of immigrants, first from Europe, then from Southeast Asia, East Africa, Central America, African American migrants from the South. And one of the things that we've come to appreciate is that these folks often bring with them what scholars in immigration history call cultural baggage. Bring with them, even if they're dirt poor and don't have but the clothes on their back, that they bring invisible suitcases full of cultural values, things like language, religion, foodways, folk tales, but also values of mutuality, values of cooperation, values of having each other's backs. And as we have studied the process that's been called Americanization, how can we make these people more American? How can our schools do that? How can social welfare programs do that? That when we scratch beneath the surface, we discover that that's typically meant how to make them more individualistic, how to make them more competitive in their orientation, rather than collaborative, cooperative, mutualistic. And I've actually come to the realization, as you introduced me tonight, that I've studied labor history for 45 years, that I've actually come to the conclusion that those of us who call ourselves Americans, we have more to learn from the people who are coming here than they have to learn from us. As we are confronted with the environmental crisis, as we are confronted with the political crisis in the United States, as we are confronted with economic crises, that learning from people who know how to have each other's backs, know how to care for each other, know how to cooperate together in a workplace, know how to get the job done. I think of a guy that I learned a lot from many years ago who was a longshoreman for much of his life. And he talked about how longshoremen work together, learning to lift things, learning to make each other safer in the work that they were doing. In the work that I was able to do as an educator with the Auto Workers Union here in St. Paul, where there was a Ford truck assembly plant, to see the ways that workers covered for each other, protected each other, kept each other safe, while also producing a quality product and having a high level of productivity, but that they covered each other's backs. And that's a set of values that when we open ourselves to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we can see how valuable those cultural values are.
Okay. Tier has a question. Hey, Tier, and then Mike, jump on in if you have a question or something to say, a comment, anything like that. Go on.
I'm good.
Tier.
Hey, Peter. How you doing today?
It's good. Good to see you.
All right. Hey, I wanted to see if I could get you to speak on the role that labor unions have played in kind of the Black struggle in general in the United States.
Well, so we start with the reality that African Americans have overwhelmingly been part of the working class. Enslaved people were brought here from Africa to work in cotton, rice, sugar cane, tobacco fields. and to work in factories processing those materials. They were used. So I think of my old friend who is no longer alive, um, the labor singer, Anne. Now I'm forgetting her last name, from Pittsburgh, but she used to say, "United we bargain, divided we beg."
Mm.
And so enslaved people were brought not only to perform work that they weren't being compensated for, but also to divide the working class, to pit white workers against African American workers. And so, as African Americans began to organize, first in the state of slavery, they organized to generate an underground railroad, to find ways, to support ways for people to escape and to get to freedom. They found ways to work together, to collaborate in solidarity with each other. Um, and then after emancipation, when employers tried to drive wages down throughout the South, when employers tried to bring African Americans from the South to the North during strikes to take the place of strikers, that the goal was to promote racism, to promote a sense of difference rather than a sense of solidarity. And we see as early as the 1870s and the 1880s, African American workers, women as well as men, organizing and organizing to take collective action. Some of that organizing was in the form of mutual benefit societies. Some of it was in the form of churches and church congregations. Some of it was in the form of organizing schools. Some of it was in the form of organizing politically. And some of it was organizing cooperatives. And some of it was organizing unions. And so work which is done in a collective way lends itself to collective organization. And so we have a process going on that's horizontal, where people who are working together are organizing together. And we have a process that's vertical, people who are doing the work pitted against the employer or the overseer or the foreman, the people who are trying to control them at work. And so we see organizing taking place, whether they are tobacco factory workers or iron mill workers or service sector workers in hotels, or especially and most significantly on Pullman cars, as the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters would organize in the 1910s, finally achieving recognition from the boss from the Pullman Company in the 1930s. That we would see this kind of organizing taking place. And often these unions would address not only workplace issues, but they would also address community issues, that they were ways to build power in a society that disrespected, that denied humanity, denied voice. Workplace organizing was the first step in building power. And so, as we would see, most famously in the Memphis sanitation workers strike of the 1960s, the strike that would lead, unfortunately, to the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that sanitation workers organized. And what was their slogan? Their slogan wasn't "give us a higher wage." Their slogan was, "I am a man." And it's "I am a man" in contrast to what? To "I am a boy," which is the way management was calling them out, disrespecting them, treating them, and in their effort to gain respect and comport themselves with dignity, they went on strike and made signs that said, "I am a man." And it's that connection that is a thread that runs through African American labor history, from the era of Reconstruction to the era of the Civil Rights Movement and beyond. So I hope, Thierry, that gets us in some way towards the question that you've raised.
Right. Is it true that Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King were trained by a labor union? CORE, I believe.
So there was, and there still is today, an organization, an institution called the Highlander Folk School in Tennessee. And the Highlander Folk School was started in the early 1930s as a center for labor organizing. And in the summer of 1954, Rosa Parks, who was a seamstress in Montgomery, Alabama, and the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who had just assumed the leadership of a Baptist church in Montgomery, Alabama, met in the summer of 1954 at the Highlander Folk School, where they arrived to take an organizing workshop. And out of that came the idea for the Montgomery bus boycott that changed the course of American history.
Amazing.
So I also, another connection is here in St. Paul, Minnesota, there was an African-American sleeping car porter who migrated here from Nebraska in the late 1890s, named Frank Boyd. And Frank Boyd became the first president of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters here in St. Paul, Minnesota in 1924. And Boyd would be fired by the Pullman Company because he was a visible and vocal workplace and union leader. He had to support his family. He had to find another job. He landed a job in a meatpacking plant in South St. Paul. And South St. Paul, interestingly, was what the historian James Lowen has called a sundown town, that African Americans could work there, but they could not live there. And so conveniently, there was a streetcar that ran from the heart of the Black community in St. Paul called the Rondo Striker streetcar that ran to South St. Paul to the meatpacking plants. And Frank Boyd would ride the streetcar every day. And on that streetcar, he met an African-American meatpacking worker named Frank Alsop, who had migrated to St. Paul from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And Alsop and Boyd began to scheme how to apply the lessons that they were learning from the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters to the meatpacking plants of South St. Paul. And they began to organize in meatpacking in the 1930s. In 1941, when A. Philip Randolph began to organize the March on Washington, which was led really by the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. Randolph was the president of that union. Boyd, who was a deacon at Pilgrim Baptist Church, active in the world of African American Baptist organizing, activism, expression, had met a very young Martin Luther King Jr., and he introduced him to A. Philip Randolph. That connection was made in St. Paul. And in 1963, there would be the March on Washington that Randolph and King would lead together, connected by Frank Boyd from the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. So these forms of solidarity and of again having each other's back became the core of African American activism for racial justice. The forerunner to what Brother William has started us with today as DEI. There would have been no DEI had there not been a fight for racial justice, a fight to be recognized as a man, a fight to earn a living wage and be treated with dignity and respect. That came, as we historians would say, came from below, came from the workplace itself, came from the neighborhood, the community itself, and pushed up the people whose names we know, like Randolph and King.
Amazing stuff. Peter, growing up, I always heard that, hey, keep on thinking, keep on dreaming, because everything has not been invented yet. And so the thing that appalls me so much about DEI, or the people bastardizing the term DEI, is that you don't get a job because you're black or you're brown. You get the job because you are qualified to do so. That is my take, and that's the hill that I'm going to die on. And I want to share this with you, because I think that the powers to be, or the greedy in our society, they want to keep everything for themselves. And the only way for them to do that is to divide and conquer and not have us come together collectively as people, not black, white, brown, but as people together. And I'm going to share this with you, because some of these people, they want to say, well, they got this because they were black, and I'm looking at some of the inventions going back to the three light traffic signal with Garrett Morgan, the gas masks with Garrett Morgan, automatic elevator doors, Alexander Miles, portable refrigerator system, Frederick McKinley Jones, dry cleaning process, open heart surgery. We can go caller ID, on, and all of these things. Now you have to have some form of brilliance in order to do those types of things. So how dare someone say you got this because you were black? No, I got this because I was qualified. And I think all of us collectively, black, white, brown, yellow, whatever you are, we can all come together and bring things together that could benefit our society. Could you talk on that a little bit, please?
Sure. Besides the inventions, again, artistically, if we think about the development of American music, if we think about the development of American visual art, if we think about the development of American dance, Quote the New York Times again. Today there was a piece about Misty Copeland, the first African-American woman to be in the American Ballet Theater. And the fact that she has dropped out of being a dancer and now she's written 3 books. So the brain power that is there, the contributions made to American culture. I know one of the things that I wanted to bring up today was Paul Robeson.
Yes.
And Robeson, the child of a man who had been born into slavery and had lived into his early adulthood enslaved, Paul Robeson would become a brilliant young scholar and a magnificent singer and actor. And Robeson applied to Princeton University around the time of World War I, and he was denied admission to Princeton University because he was Black. He wasn't admitted in because he was Black. He was denied admission. And who denied him admission? A man named Woodrow Wilson, who would go from being the president of Princeton to being the president of the United States. As I've studied Woodrow Wilson, I've had to think about maybe by the World War I period, the Confederacy had won the Civil War and had taken over the White House and the American government. And so Robeson goes to Rutgers. And at Rutgers, he becomes the first Black football All-American, and he becomes the first Black member of Phi Beta Kappa, the National Honor Society. He didn't get, those doors did not open to him because he was Black. He had to push and fight to get those doors open. He then became the first African-American star on Broadway in Eugene O'Neill's play, The Emperor Jones. Robeson continued to be not just talented, but also like those sanitation workers in Memphis, or like those sleeping car porters in St. Paul. Robeson continued to fight for racial justice long before we heard the expression DEI. And in 1946, and I only know this story because it was told to me by my undergraduate college advisor, a man named Jan Dizard, who had grown up in Duluth, Minnesota. And Jan told me the story that in 1946, when he was a 4-year-old child, a union called the Marine Cooks and Stewards Union that represented sailors, seamen, cooks on board ships, struck all across Lake Superior here in northern Minnesota. And they were striking for equal pay for African American cooks, stewards, sailors, equal pay. And Robeson showed up on the picket line to support them. Why did this Broadway star, this Phi Beta Kappa college graduate, why did he come to Duluth in 1946? Because he not only wanted to show solidarity for the sailors and cooks who were on strike, but also because he was launching a new organization called the American Crusade Against Lynching. And why would you start an organization against lynching in Duluth, Minnesota, which is almost Canada? Wouldn't you start it in Alabama or Mississippi or Georgia or Virginia? Well, there had been a lynching in Duluth, Minnesota in June of 1920. 3 young black circus workers were accused of having raped a young white woman. Eventually, the story would come out that nothing had happened, but they were taken by a mob and they were lynched. And Robeson wanted to start his organization in Duluth and recognize these 3 young men and what had been done to them, and to connect it with the labor movement. Now, one of the great things about studying history and continuing to study history is I get to learn new things all the time. Last week, a historian named Marcus Rediker, who teaches at the University of Pittsburgh and has a new book out that I encourage everyone listening to read. The book is called The Freedom Ship, and it is about what Marcus calls the Maritime Underground Railroad. And in his book, he provides documentation that tens of thousands of enslaved men and women escaped from slavery by stowing away on ships. And he asks the question, how could they stow away on the ship? Didn't they have help? And he provides the evidence that marine cooks, sailors, and stewards, some of them free African Americans based in the North, and some of them white, provided cover for these fugitive, escaped, enslaved people. They were the forerunners of the Marine Cooks and Stewards Union in the 1840s that would go on strike in the 1940s for equal pay for African American workers. And Paul Robeson was bringing that knowledge to Duluth. And my mentor, again, who was 4 years old at this moment, had the life-changing experience of being picked up by Paul Robeson and put on his shoulders. And they then marched on the picket line, and Robeson sang his song, Joe Hill. I wonder, William, can you play that song?
Absolutely. Let's do it right now.
Give people a taste of Paul Robeson.
I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he. In Salt Lake City, Joe, says I, am standing by my bed. They framed you on a murder charge, says Joe, but I ain't dead. Says Joe, but I ain't dead. The copper boss bosses killed you, Joe. They shot you, Joe, says I. Takes more than guns to kill a man, says Joe. I didn't die, says Joe. I didn't die. And standing there as big as life, and smiling with his eyes, says Joe, what they can never kill, went on to organize, went on to organize. From San Diego up to Maine, in every mine and mill, where workers strike and organize, it's there you'll find your hill. It's there you'll find your hill. I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he. I never died, says he.
All right.
As a Ford owner, you have the choice to get your vehicle serviced at our...
Okay, no problem at all.
No free advertising there.
No free advertising. That's exactly right. There's something else that you sent me, and I'm gonna pull this up if I can,
Sure.
Peter, and I want to share this with the audience as well. Thanks to Peter. Okay, let's do this, and I believe it was this right here. Do you want to talk to us about this? Let's see. This was, what year was this?
Yeah, this was 1986.
Okay, and explain to us, what are we looking at?
Sure. So in 1985, the 3M company, which is based here in St. Paul, Minnesota, their headquarters, the 3M company announced that they were going to close their audio and video tape manufacturing plant in a New Jersey community named Freehold. And some of you are old enough to remember that Bruce Springsteen had a song called My Hometown, which was about Freehold. Bruce Springsteen had grown up in Freehold, New Jersey. And 3M had run a very profitable plant for many years. And you may remember that in the 1980s, the issue of plant closings was a central issue in the United States for steel workers, auto workers, meatpacking workers, many of them African American. The 1980s was the decade of Ronald Reagan, was a decade of plant closings. And 3M announced that they were going to close this plant. And the union, called the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Union, tried to build a popular campaign with the support of Bruce Springsteen and Willie Nelson, other people in the entertainment industry, because of the product being audio and video tape. And in February of 1986, we learned, we were interested because we were in St. Paul, headquarters of 3M, workers in other parts of the country who were organizing against plant closings in various industries, we learned that something remarkable had taken place, which was that workers at a 3M plant in Johannesburg, South Africa, had launched an illegal sympathy strike in support of the workers in New Jersey. A lot of us were organizing in the United States then, trying to get workers in the United States to take action to support particularly Black workers in South Africa. This was still the apartheid era. Nelson Mandela was still in prison. And the workers went on strike to support the workers in the United States. 4 months later, in June of 1986, the shop steward, Amon Masane, who had led that strike in Johannesburg, came to the United States on a tour to talk about what had happened. He had this stunning videotape of the workers in South Africa walking out of the plant. And walk is the wrong word. The word, if you're of my generation, you may remember, the word was toy, which was somewhere between a dance and a march with music.
Mm.
And we saw in that video breathtaking images. First of all, of 200 Black workers all wearing T-shirts that said, 3M, don't abandon Freehold, my hometown. And then as they danced and sang, they then went to the flagpole at the plant and they took down the United States flag.
Wow.
And they took down the 3M flag that were on the pole. It was breathtaking to see. And they didn't know, as Amon would tell us, they didn't know if they would be arrested. They didn't know if they would be shot. They didn't know if they would be fired. But they thought that it was the right thing to do.
Right.
Now, do you have the picture of the crowd standing in front of the mural?
I believe so. Hold on, let me stop sharing this.
Yes.
And we'll get back. Okay, let's do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you enlarge it at all?
Let's see if we can enlarge this even more. If we can.
So we just want to see the picture of the mural.
Okay.
Well, maybe it's the best we can do.
That's
But
the best. Yeah.
all right. So in Austin, Minnesota, which is 100 miles from St. Paul, workers had gone on strike in August of 1985 at the Hormel meatpacking plant. And they were still on strike in June of 1986. And 100 workers had come together with this brilliant visual artist named Mike Alowitz, who had come to visit. And with Mike, they painted this stunning mural.
Wow.
On the outside of the Union Hall.
Let's see if we can enlarge it even more. No, it won't let us enlarge it.
Nah.
Hey, William,
Yes. Yes.
William, I think I can help. Maybe just try this. There's a control button at the bottom of your keyboard, CTRL. Press and hold control, and then go up to the top right of your screen where the plus sign is. And so press control and press the plus sign. It might enlarge for you, maybe.
Okay, let's try it. And you say, okay, control.
Control at the bottom of your keyboard and plus sign at the top of your keyboard next to backspace.
Okay, let's try it.
There we go.
Yeah.
Hit it again.
Yeah.
Hit it again. There we go.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, please.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you. Thanks.
So here was the dedication of the mural. And the union, then at that moment, the union had 1,750 members. Of the 1,750, 2 were black.
Mm.
The union had a meeting and they voted unanimously to dedicate the mural to Nelson Mandela. And Amon Masane, who had led the Wildcat strike in Johannesburg and was touring the United States, came here to St. Paul for a rally at the United Auto Workers Union Hall, then proceeded to Austin, where he received the dedication of the mural to Nelson Mandela. And the union gave him a Cram Your Spam t-shirt for him to smuggle into Nelson Mandela in his jail cell on Robben Island outside of Cape Town. And we never did get a picture of Brother Mandela wearing that t-shirt, but it was reported to us that he sure did. So here was this international, interracial solidarity in 1986, connecting Minnesota with South Africa, connecting meatpacking workers and videotape workers, and using art as a way to manifest that solidarity. So this was one of the most exciting things that I've ever witnessed, to be there when that picture was taken, to see that t-shirt going into Amon's hands to bring to Nelson Mandela. It really, really showed to me the capacity of people to grow, to develop their way of thinking. Today, the Hormel workforce is 75% first generation immigrant. The workers there speak 46 different languages. There are people from Togo, from Eritrea, from Ethiopia, from Ghana, from Nigeria, from Honduras, from Mexico, from Ecuador, from El Salvador, from Laos, from Cambodia, from Vietnam, from Thailand, from Myanmar. And they have just in the last 3 months won a new contract with a $4 an hour raise. This immigrant workforce. This story has become part of their story. It's why I think it's so important to pass this history on so that people will know it, because it's not being taught in the schools. It has to be passed on through unions, through community organizations, through podcasts like yours. This is the way that we have to transmit these historical stories.
You know, Peter, I'm looking at this picture and I see young children out there.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
All in solidarity. And this gives you an idea of how much better the world would be. not only the United States, but let's say the United States, how much better we will be if we all work together. And I think racism is that boogeyman in the room. It's something that needs to go away. And I know it's not going to happen overnight, but I think it is a cancer in our society. All of us will be much better off. I'm talking about poverty. We're talking about crime. We're talking about if you start treating people as people and we come together and work together, I think we can eliminate a lot of problems that we have in our own society. What's your take?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, we could, me and other college professors, we could learn so much from these immigrant meatpacking workers. How have they figured out how to stand together, how to work together, how to care for each other, how to communicate, how to share their food, how to share their music, how to share their humor, and how they pass that along, as you've noticed, to the next generation, to the young children. There was just a wonderful piece on the PBS NewsHour a week and a half ago. My friend Fred DeSam Lazaro, who's a journalist based here in Minnesota, but works for the NewsHour. And he did a piece about how Austin, Minnesota has changed because of the immigrants coming to work in the meatpacking industry. And he got so captivated by watching the children play soccer that became as large a part of his story as the workers in the meatpacking plant. How do these kids learn how to play soccer together? How do they recognize each other as compatriots rather than as competitors? And that's the beauty of the possibility. And that's what came to be called DEI. And it gives the current resident in the White House hives to think about these kinds of relationships, and he wants to snuff them out, and we have to work to nurture, honor, and maintain these kinds of relationships.
You know, he doesn't realize that if he taught more or talked about ways that we could unify one another versus separate one another, his job would be a lot easier. It will be a lot easier. I'm talking about I can see growth in our economy. I can see growth in business, even advancements in health and medicines and just about everything. What it goes back, and I remember a story, and I'm sure you know this quite well. At one time, and China is still a superpower, but at one time, China, history says that they had everything, and they had an economy, and they were just scholars and just about everything that you want. Then they decided they were so smart, and they were too smart for themselves. They wanted to build the Great Wall of China, and they wanted to keep everything inside. But also what they did, they shot themselves in the foot because they wouldn't let new ideas and innovations come in. And so I kind of see how when you start having separatism and racism and stopping progress or from the outside, then you also are hurting yourself because you're not getting any new information, any new ideas, that new enthusiasm. I'd like to have your take on that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think whether it is, immigrant workers who are picking vegetables in the fields in California or processing those vegetables into food, or processing meat in meat packing plants, or whether it's doctors and nurses and other healthcare providers. I am still in recovery from spinal surgery that I had 2.5 years ago, performed on me by a surgeon who was an immigrant to the United States from India. And the doctor who has overseen my recovery is an immigrant from Afghanistan. And the nurses who took care of me were from Nigeria and Ghana. And, you know, we are going to be in terrible shape as an economy, as a society, as a community. If the walls, both figuratively and physically, if those walls go up and we're unable to get immigrants here into the United States, from the food on our table to the healthcare workers who help us recover from injuries, we're going to be in terrible, terrible trouble. So it's so short-sighted to try to keep people out. So short-sighted.
Absolutely. Mike, I want to hear from you. Questions, comment, or whatever it is, brother.
I'm fascinated listening to you. It's okay to call you Peter, is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. I also commend your bravery in coming back to the Boomerang show.
I had a good time the first time.
Good. I'm glad you did. I hope you come back again, by the way, because you're covering an awful lot of ground here, and I'm just trying to absorb everything you're saying, and wonderful history lesson that you're giving all me in particular, because I didn't know a great deal of the information that you've been passing out today. Let's see, where do I start? I like your card analogy. I really like that. We're not all dealt the same cards, but we're the cards are the cards, and we have to play them. I use a similar analogy where on a racetrack, if you're going to run the 440 or whatever your race is going to be, some of us get to start at the starting line, and some of us don't. And that's not just black and white. That's of all races, and depending on where you are in America, can determine where you start to run that race. So I use a similar analogy because we don't all start at the start line. Let's see. America is meant to be the melting pot. I think I mentioned maybe last time you were on, sir, that my mother came from Scotland. So my mother had a green card till the day she died. It's in my safe. I won't go get it, but I think I've showed it here before. She maintained her British citizenship because at the time she came over here in 1949, you weren't allowed to have dual citizenship. And it happened later on, but so she kept her British. She was very proud of her British heritage. She worked for 45 years for a law firm down in Ventura County, which is in Southern California. So the melting pot is wonderful because what it does is, in theory, it gives us a common goal to make this country the best it can possibly be. Not that we're better than other countries, but make America the best it can possibly be. So that common goal and melting pot I think is a wonderful thing. William was speaking about the accomplishments of Black people in America. And I would like to remind you also, traffic circles were created by a Black man. And unfortunately, this is the irony of the situation. He created traffic circles and he died on one. And the other irony is the gentleman that created blood transfusions. He was in a car accident and he was denied access to a white-only hospital, and he died because he couldn't get, guess what, a blood transfusion. Wow. And I want to get back to you, Peter, because again, I'm fascinated with everything you're saying. Life is not always fair, and sometimes we have to dig our heels in and make our own way. And if you're unwilling to do that and you're going to play victim, then you're not going to get anywhere. As all these people that you've highlighted here and what Williams highlighted, they I'm going to swear, sorry guys. They grabbed their ass with both hands and they made their own way. And that's the way everyone should pursue their life. Make your own path and keep your head down and forge your way through. History should shape our future. We can never forget our history. Excuse me. We can't forget our history or we're doomed. If we remember our history, if we remember our mistakes, if you remember when you got up to get a drink of water or go to the bathroom in the middle of the night and you stubbed your toe on the end of your bed, you taught yourself a lesson. You're not going to stub your toe on the end of the bed again because it hurt like hell. So history needs to stay in place in total clarity, which is what you're doing today, Peter. You're giving great clarity by your storytelling ability. And by doing so, you're not forcing, but you're, what's the right word? You're highly recommending that we don't forget any of this stuff. So otherwise we're doomed to repeat it, is the old saying. So history should shape our future and we shouldn't forget, and we should move one step at a time forward in a positive direction and not a negative direction. So that there's my speech for the moment, and I'd gladly come back and talk a little bit more. Now, William, before you get back to your screen, you might have to cancel out what you did with the Control Plus. You might have to cancel it out with equal numbers of Control Minus.
Okay,
so
we'll try that.
Time. It might screw up your screen.
Let's try this first.
Oh, there we are.
We're good.
Okay.
We're good.
We're back. We're back. Hey, well said, Mike. Another thing, Mike sent me a text one day a few months back, and he was furious because Pete Hegseth, he wanted to cancel out Jackie Robinson out of the archives in the Pentagon. And I was equally as furious. I mean, and then also going a little bit deeper, and you're well aware of the Tuskegee Airmen and the Red Tails flying over 1,400 sorties without losing a mission at all. And that's history. And they want to cancel out that. And I think that is a grave, grave mistake to cancel out. Like Michael said, if you cancel out a history or you don't know it or don't remember it, you're bound to repeat it. However, there is great history out here from everyone that should never, ever, ever be canceled. Because let's say someone, okay, the car was invented. Then it was, matter of fact, it's my understanding that a black man invented that first car, okay? And before the Wright brothers, the first airplane was invented by a black man, but they never got credit for this. But what I'm saying is, when you cancel out history, history is your foundation to build upon, as far as I'm concerned. Say Mike builds a car, and I come around, I take Mike's ideas and improve on those. And you come along and take our ideas and you improve on those. That's the evolution. That's how things get better. History should be your foundation to build, not to destroy or take away that, right?
Yep.
It gives you that starting block, right? So, Peter, whatever you want to say on anything that Mike and I just said, any response?
No, I want to tell another story.
Please do.
And that I think that it, in some ways, it also brings us to those children that you saw, William, in front of the mural.
Okay.
And, so in 1898, the United States went to war with Spain. And one of the central issues was control over Cuba. And there was a grassroots movement in Cuba to try to drive the Spaniards out. And there was an invasion by the United States military. The significant part of the United States military that invaded Cuba in 1898 were African Americans. And there is a wonderful Afro-Cuban filmmaker named Gloria Rolando, who is working on a documentary film that looks at the relationships between African American soldiers and Afro-Cubans during the Spanish-American War. Well, we found out here in Minnesota that the St. Paul Black community identified very strongly with what was going on in Cuba, and they put on, in November of 1898, a pageant to celebrate what they were calling the Cuban Revolution. Not the revolution of Che Guevara and Fidel Castro that we would know about in the 20th century, the Cuban Revolution of the late 19th century. And they put on this pageant, and the first African American lawyer in the state of Minnesota, a gentleman named Frederick McGee, was given the starring role in the pageant. And this was 1898. In 1909, Frederick McGee would be W.E.B. Du Bois's right-hand man in the establishment of the NAACP, what was first called the Niagara Movement and then the NAACP. So McGee is he's building on his experiences. The character that McGee plays in the pageant is the Afro-Cuban leader of the revolution on the ground in Cuba, a man named Antonio Maceo. And interestingly, Maceo had been organizing for decades in Cuba, and at one point he was at risk of being arrested by the Spaniards, and he went into exile and ended up living in New Orleans, where he became a cigar roller in a cigar factory that was unionized. This was part of Antonio Maceo's education, life history. So he's the star of this pageant. In the next year, two black male boys, are born in St. Paul. And in both cases, their parents give them the first name Maceo, an anglicization of Maceo. Maceo Littlejohn and Maceo Finney. This is 1899.
And what Maceo, that I'm unfamiliar with that term or that name.
That was the name of the leader in Cuba.
Okay, gotcha.
The leader of the Afro-Cuban uprising.
I understand.
They would both grow up to become union organizers in the 1930s. Maceo Finney, an organizer with the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. Maceo Littlejohn, an organizer with the Dining Car Waiters Union. That one story has got me to where I'm curious about everyone's name. Why did our parents give us the name they gave us? And how have we lived up to that name, if we have? And both of these kids grow up to be union organizers, which is amazing. And Maceo Finney's son, his son would become the first black police chief in St. Paul. In fact, to this point in history, the only black police chief in St. Paul. But the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters and the Dining Car Waiters Union would become integral to the development of the civil rights movement in St. Paul and throughout the upper Midwest in the 1950s and 1960s. So these legacies get passed on. They get passed on to the next generation. And whether it's embodied in their name or in stories that they're told by their grandparents at the dinner table, or bedtime stories that they're told. It, again, because our damn educational system does not do a good job of teaching this history. And if Trump is going to have his way, it's going to be even less. And so families have to take on, they have to be intentional about passing these stories down to the next generation and the next, and finding ways to symbolize and embody those stories with the names that they give. That's just critical to passing on the legacy of this history and these stories, because the history is terrific. I love telling the stories, in part because you've never heard them before. And that's not your fault that you haven't heard them. It's a damn shame that you haven't heard them. There should be movies about them. There should be TV shows about them. There certainly should be curriculum about them. And right now, Mr. Trump is very busy trying to make sure that there won't be signs in the national parks about them. That these histories are not going to be told. They're going to be erased and forgotten if we don't do the job of keeping them alive, passing them on.
I see history as if you throw a stone into a pond or a lake, and it ripples out in 360 degrees. It doesn't just ripple out in one direction; it goes in all directions at the same time. And again, your ability to tell stories, sir, I really commend you, because storytelling is an art, and you're doing it with passion, because I'm pretty much assuming this has been your life work based on everything that William told us earlier and based on your passion I can see and hear from you today. And you paint with your words, you paint in people's minds a very, very colorful picture. And that is an art, sir. So I really commend you on that. As far as names go, I have a somewhat of an amusing story about my name. I'm Michael, and my mother again was from Scotland, and her favorite author was Ian Fleming. And my mother wanted to name me Ian, and my dad got to the paperwork first and named me Michael. And the reason he named me Michael is an odd story. But you remember Art Linklater had a show called Kids Say the Darndest Things, or something similar to that. Yeah. And there was a child on there named Michael sitting up on one of the stools, and Art Linklater was going down the line to these little boys and little girls and asking them, well, who do you look like? Do you look like your mother or your daddy? And this one child named Michael said, I don't look like my mommy or the daddy. I look like the mailman. So that stuck in my father's head, and so he named me Michael after this kid that says I look like the mailman. So there's my and then what I did, what we did, my wife and I, when we had our first child, and this was her decision. I did not make this decision. I left it up to her. She knew the story that I just told you, and out of respect for my mother, who had no granddaughters, even after her death, she had no granddaughters, or all grandsons. And my wife decided to name our son Ian. Yeah. So there's the lineage of names in my family, right, at least. But yeah. I thoroughly enjoy your storytelling ability. And you're not just telling stories, you're telling reality and history in a way that really grasps us internally. I mean, the trials and tributes that you're alluding to are horrific, and history is not pretty. And if history makes you uncomfortable, good. It should make you uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I thank you, and I commend your bravery for showing back up on the Boomerang show.
You
Mike,
know,
thank you so much for sharing that story about your name. And
you know,
it's
yeah,
wonderful. Well,
I'm enjoying this. I had to step away for a little bit, but I was listening to the program about those two young
yeah,
men that became union leaders and the first black police chief.
yeah.
Uh, yeah, and so these stories are inspiring, and I wish there were. And we're going to do our best on this platform to present you as often as you can come because I think it's so important, and these things are vitally important. And there's Tier. I was going to talk about. I'm waiting for him to come back because Tier, he was telling me about you, and he was a student or he attended your class, and he was telling me a story about how he came back uh, to visit you and to sit in your class because he thought that you were extremely interesting. Tia, I was just talking about you and how you introduced me to Peter, and I'm so happy that you did because of his storytelling and his ability to communicate with us, with the
It's a
audience. And
gift.
I'm
It's a gift.
fascinated by the information. Tia, thanks for coming back, brother. What would you like to say or ask Peter?
Um, I'm not sure if you guys already. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
You're good.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you guys already spoke on it, but I know they were speaking on DEI earlier, and Peter was saying that we should, we're gaining more from DEI than we're learning more from them than what they're learning from us. And I wanted to know if he could speak on. I don't know if he knows like the exact numbers, but in my opinion, or from what I've understand, isn't a lot of the reason why America is so successful is because we're taking the best and brightest from other countries?
Sure. Sure. And the visa system is set up, and at least now Trump is messing with it and these $100,000 visas but typically if you were coming for a skilled position, the visa system was more lenient than if you were coming to take an unskilled position. So yeah. Um, I want to go back to the name thing again just for a minute that Mike has said more about and and there's a great book um, about the ways that enslaved men and women used names to establish family ties in the
Yes.
face of the threat of children being sold away from their parents um, and it's by a historian named Herbert Gutman and it was called The Black Family in Slavery and Freedom. And Gutman's book then got picked up by a guy who told his own story. There is an absolutely brilliant African American historian today whose name is Joe, middle initial W, last name Trotter, Trotter, Jr., Joe W. Trotter Jr. And I've heard him make the case publicly that his name is Joe, not Joseph, and that he was named Joe because not only was his father named Joe, but also his grandfather, and that the name Joe was not a diminutive of Joseph. The name Joe was spinning the African name Cujo. And Gutman talks about Cujo in his book, The Black Family in Slavery and Freedom, and points out that Cujo was a name given to a boy who was born on a Monday. It meant born on a Monday. And so there was a connection not only over multiple generations establishing that thread, but there was a connection all the way back to an African language, an African cultural practice of naming children by the day of the week which they were born. And so as he's become, a PhD and a tenured professor and the author now of probably 6 or 7 books, he continues to correct people who in a polite or a professional setting think they should call him Joseph rather than Joe. So, the minimal resources that enslaved men and women had access to, that they could use names as a way to establish all of this connection to who they knew they were, rather than who the dominant culture, the enslaver, was saying they were. So, in my case, so the Jewish tradition is that children are supposed to be named after the ancestor who has most recently transitioned. And in my case, it was an Uncle Julius. And I was born, I'm old, I was born in 1951. And my parents in 1951 did not want to name their baby Julius, in part because there was a Jewish man named Julius Rosenberg who was being put on trial by Joseph McCarthy for having given nuclear secrets to the Soviet Union. And they did not want me to carry that name. And so they decided to give me the middle name, J. They still didn't want to touch Julius. But so I'm Peter J. Rachleff. And I know that story, and I know my connection to my great uncle Julius. But it also tells me about the political climate in which I was born in the early 1950s and what was going on in the United States. So you might be discriminated against because of your name, not just because of the color of your skin or because of your religion, but also because of your name.
Amazing.
Hey, Peter. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting a little background feed. But anyway, I found out years ago that my name is William, and it means it's in Hebrew. It means that are similar to protection or strength. You see, and I took pride in that. I said, "Wow, okay." So names are very, very important, and a lot of times parents will name their children based on how they perceive that child to be.
Right.
But I'm interested, the name Tier. Can you tell us how or why your parents named you Tier?
Mine's not that deep. My grandfather, when they were trying to come up with names, my grandfather said he knew a girl named Tierra back in Kentucky. And my father or my mom thought, hey, that was pretty cool. Let's just take the off of it and just, make him Tierra. That was mine wasn't really, my name didn't come that deep. It sounds like a deep name, but no, it's nothing deeper than that. But I wanted to ask Peter. He brought up his Jewish heritage, and there's a lot going on these days in the media and just in reality and as far as Israel is concerned. And I have had this theory for years. And when the Oppenheimer movie came out, I was anxious to see it, to see if they touched on anything close to what my theory was. And they did not. But I want to run it past you, and you tell me if you think it has any legs or not. So, as you know, like, the United States has been basically in the Israeli corner for many, many decades at this point now. And it seems like, especially as of late, there is no atrocity or anything that they can do that goes too far, that's going to in any way inhibit the United States support. I think a lot of the reasons why the Democrats lost the last election is they couldn't win a lot of those Midwestern states where there's a high Muslim population, and people were very disappointed in the Biden administration just continuously feeding Israel weapons and not stopping that. And I've always had this theory that one of the reasons why we give Israel so much support is because, and I don't mind saying this, Jewish people are pretty smart. They invented, or they were the first to split the atom, which nuclear power is the most powerful weapon we have on this planet. It's the great equalizer there, the ability to drop a nuclear bomb. And I think that I'm wondering, is it possible that a deal was struck back in the days with Oppenheimer, where he said, "I'll give you this weapon, but in exchange, you have to help my people"? Do you think anything like that might have taken place?
Great question.
Do you think anything like that might have taken place? Because that's kind of what I've always figured, but I have absolutely nothing to back it up.
I don't think so. I think that the United States support for Israel has been about having leverage with the Arab states and having control over oil and the resources that the Arab states have. I don't think it's been about any deal made here. I think it's about wealth and power, and that's what makes the political commitments and decisions. Because they were, they turned on Oppenheimer. They locked his brother up.
They actually did, yeah.
As a communist or an accused communist. I don't think there's no loyalty among thieves, and I don't think, and I think that our foreign policy has been run by thieves from Jump Street.
Yeah. If I can jump in real quick.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned something here, and oil. I think that is the big thing. I think that is the reason why we got into the first war with the Iraqi war going way back, because remember, the United States, Iraq they were allies of ours, and then you had Qatar. And if I correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that Qatar and Iraq share. There's a basin of oil between those two countries, and Qatar wanted to hold all of it. For some reason, they had control of the oil flowing back and forth or flowing into Iraq, but it's supposed to have been a shared responsibility for that. Okay, and then if you look at Russia, their main economy comes from oil, if I understand correctly, and they're just trying to control that. And so the Ukrainians right now, they have been bombing oil refineries in Russia, which is crippling them. So I think that the big thing is that your power brokers, it's all about greed and control of that valuable resource that we call oil. And I think that's what, Peter, I'd like for you to jump
Yeah,
in.
I mean, I think it's ironic that right now I'm in the middle of reading Bill McKibben's new book called "Here Comes the Sun," and it's about wind and solar energy and how much cheaper it is than oil. He says, but the thing that's blocked it is that the rich people can't figure out how to make a profit off of wind and solar.
Yes, sir.
And so they continue to push us towards fossil fuels, not because it's cheaper, but because they can make a profit off it.
A renewable profit, because if you have the wind and solar, it's not it's renewable energy. However, they're not going to make the day-to-day profit that fossil fuels make.
That's exactly right.
Right.
And remember, and because marijuana, for instance, was the big thing that, oh yeah, we can't have that until they found out a way to make a profit.
Yeah.
Until they found a way, and now all of a sudden it's legal.
Yeah.
In most places, right? Because they found a way to make a profit. It's all about greed, corruption, and divide and conquer, and
pharmaceuticals.
Pharmaceuticals.
Look at that.
Hey, it's all out of control. It's all about greed, and so they throw us these distractions that keep us off of what they're actually doing. It's all about greed. It's all about greed.
I have another question for Peter.
Yes, sir.
I read Rachel Maddow's book, things called Drift, and she was speaking on the history of these powerful oil companies and the influence that they've had on governments, United States government, governments in New Guinea. I mean, just all over the world, and just how powerful these companies are. Do you think in any way our attack or impending attack on Venezuela has something to do with Venezuela not being willing to cooperate with American oil companies?
Sure. More so than that there might be a couple of little boats with fentanyl on them. They're much more worried about controlling their oil and getting access to it. Sure. Maduro is no wonderful human being.
Right.
But he's continuing some of what Chavez, the policies which are nationalist and focused on Venezuela's economic stability. So sure, but I want to come back to a point that William made right at the beginning, and I'm trying to be a polite guest and not disagree with my host.
This is the Boomerang show, sir. You don't have to be polite on the Boomerang. It's okay.
No. Hey, look, no, you can't.
I can disagree politely, but
and that's okay. And that's okay.
But I think that Brother William, you framed DEI as something that also worked well for corporate management. I disagree with you.
Okay, I would love to hear.
And I think that corporate management continues to primarily use divide and conquer.
Okay.
That they are more concerned about being confronted by a unified workforce that might challenge them than they are by losing some of the talent that they might be able to get if they get more people of color into the executive positions.
Okay.
So I think, I think that, and these are my politics, but that I think that we need a working class strategy in the United States that incorporates DEI, that incorporates anti-racism, that is based on solidarity. And I think that is how we will make American society better. But, I think that if you're granting that interests in oil might drive certain government decisions, that Trump's position in the Middle East or Venezuela, I think that I want to concentrate my energy and my efforts on how and why working people need to overcome the divisions that have been created within and among us. And I'm not interested in selling some Silicon Valley executive or some Wall Street executive on shouldn't you be liberal on matters of race. And if he was for a hot minute, I wouldn't trust him in the long run anyway. But if you're not offended, Brother William, I do want to challenge you on that.
And that's okay. No, I'm not offended because if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Okay. But my thing is, I am not buying that when you walk into a workplace, that person of color is there because they are of color. I'm not buying that. Okay. That's my
sure.
And that was my take on that. But what offends me is that you have uneducated people that throws the word DEI out like it is a bad thing. That person's there only because they're black, only because they're brown. That is my argument against that. My thing is that they are there because they have earned that. I have worked several corporate jobs, and I was among less than 10% of that work. I was represented less than 10%, and in some cases less than 2%. And that's okay. I'm getting a little background. And in a lot of cases, I was the only one there, and I knew that I had to work harder to get that position, and that was my take on that. Mm-hmm. And now let me ask you this, Peter: do you disagree? Do you agree or disagree that companies who have DEI initiatives are more profitable and more successful?
I haven't seen any evidence to that effect.
Okay, I've seen some. I've seen on several different fronts, but like I said, to me, to say that a person of color has a job only because they're a person of color, to me, that's a slap in my face.
Of course.
Okay, and is highly irritating and highly offensive to me. All right. And I think that without things like programs like DEI and even affirmative action, because like you mentioned earlier about you talk about Paul Robeson and scholars and people of that nature that were denied entry into our major universities, not because they weren't smart enough, but it was purely about race. Mm-hmm. Okay, why they were denied. You can take the first black female pilot. She had to go over to France to get a license to fly. Okay, and so we can look at various areas where I'm saying is that if I look at a black person, as a matter of fact, if I get on an airplane, I'm going to feel safer because I say, hey, this brother had to jump over some hurdles to get there. Yep. If I walk into a hospital and I see a black doctor, I'm going to say, yeah. Or any position of power, I'm saying this person had to work twice as hard to get there because and in the past, we have been denied opportunities because we were black or we were brown and things of that nature. That's my take on that. So no, I don't have any problem with you pushing back on it, because that maybe you missed my point, but that's the point I was trying to make.
Thank you.
Okay, Mike, you had something to say? Please.
I
jump
do.
in.
I do, because I'm going to disagree with you, as you well know, William, because we've had this discussion before. DEI is something, and I'd like to get into this in depth, and we only have like 15 minutes to go, and I don't think we can properly do service on DEI in this 15 minutes. But I would like to throw out some seeds I'd like to plant some seeds in both of your brains. William, you already know how I feel about this. DEI is something that looked really good on paper, but in function, it doesn't work. And I would suggest the way to fix this, and I brought this up before here on the Boomerang, the way to fix this is when you apply for a job, the people that are going to hire you, all they get is your application. And in your application, it shows no picture, no personal information. It shows your qualifications. It shows your merit-based only, and it shows your accomplishments. So think about this. It doesn't show your age. It doesn't show your picture. It doesn't show your race. And it shows what you were able to accomplish. I think this is a proper way to solve all of this. So what happens is the most qualified person gets the job. Yes, I know there's face-to-face interviews and things like that, and how well you speak and how well you communicate. As Brother Peter here is a massive, wonderful communicator. Not all of us are able to communicate the same. My friends and all tell me I have verbal diarrhea, which I do, and I do have that gift of gab that I think I received from my mother, because she was a very well-spoken lady, highly educated. But DEI on its face was a very good idea to level the playing field. Like I talked about earlier, running a race. Now all of us are going to start on the start line. No one's going to start 5 yards back or 10 yards back. So leveling the playing field the best way to do that is to remove personal information from that, other than your qualifications for the job that you're shooting for. Let me see if I can go back to my notes here. Merit base. Yep. I don't think it always works properly, because, as Peter alluded to, and if I'm misspeaking your words, please correct me, Peter. But you've alluded to the fact that DEI is somehow a leverage or a crowbar for companies to go, see, we're very diverse. Look at our percentage of this color, that color, A, B, C, different colors. Look, we're very diverse. And I think they're using it the companies are using it for profit. So they can say, look, we have X percentage of this color and we have X percentage of this color. Look how diverse we are. And they beat their chest on that and they say, look how wonderful this company is. And I think that's wrong, because it's forced fairness. It's forced integration. It's forced. And when you force things like this, I think you're doomed to fail, because eventually it's going to turn around and bite you in the butt. So there's my feeling on DEI. I would love to get into DEI on another show, Peter, if you would come back, because I have some very strong feelings about it. And it's just, it's inappropriate for me to bring up in the last 10 minutes of the show.
Yeah.
But if you'd like to speak on anything I just said, please, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are.
Peter? Go ahead.
Well, I think that your analogy about the starting line for the race, that's where we need to start. And by the time people are applying for jobs, the damage has already been done. That we need to address access to education, access
Absolutely.
to resources to support that, and that would necessitate unequal spending of resources. We need to put more money into the schools that have been behind, and we will eventually get to the what are people's qualifications when they come for the job. But I think we have to start very early in ways to create equity, and DEI has not really addressed that.
Thank
And
you.
I wanted to ask, because I've spent so much time in the academic world that it's a term that I'm very familiar with, but do you all know the expression legacy admission?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Right. So that's like daddy went to this school and became a donor after he got graduated and established. And so his kid goes to the head of the line.
It's favoritism.
And that favoritism has persisted throughout the academic world. And so that's not even been addressed in debates about DEI.
That's exactly right.
I haven't heard Trump say, and let's get rid of legacy admissions, because how did he get where he got?
That's right.
It was daddy's connections and how his kids and his son-in-law and how they're getting where they're going.
Mm-hmm.
They're not running the same race as everybody else.
Exactly.
So I would be happy to, come back and have a conversation, a fuller conversation about, let's say, affirmative action and DEI. Sure.
Absolutely. I think that's all fair because I have my take on that. And again, you're exactly right, Peter, because no one talk about legacy admissions. And I got this job, or I got into this university because my daddy gave that university a lot of money, or my family went to this university, and we all contributed money. You see, and so no, I agree with that 1,000,000%. And my take, like I said, I agree with merit base. If you give everybody the opportunity,
right?
Okay. Merit base would be
do what I said on applications. Remove the race, remove the age, remove everything else. Just put the qualifications up there, and then nobody can cry foul.
Well, and then the only problem with that is once I show up, okay, I've proven myself on the application because you didn't see me, you don't know who I am, you don't know my name, you know my name, but then if my name is Ishmael. Or my name is
William. I'm sorry to cut you off. I know, but I'm sorry. On your application, there's a number, X20009. That's it. There's no name, none of that.
Excellent. That would work. That would be great in a perfect world. Then what happens when I show up on that job and I have this racist boss that says, "Oh, it's you." Okay, saying how are we going to address that? See, this is the thing about it is. A lot of black people, because get these jobs, then all of a sudden, when they show up, then you have a racist boss well, let me find a way to get rid of you. Because keep in mind, here recently, Tia, I'm gonna let you jump in, brother. He's got his hand up. I'm gonna let you jump in. Over 300,000 black women have lost their jobs during this administration. 300,000. Are you going to tell me they aren't qualified? They aren't qualified. Kamala Harris, for instance. Oh, she's a DEI hire, which I hate. Well, guess what?
Don't get me started on her.
She was elected. And on top of that, okay, what about Trump? Are you trying to tell me that he's smarter than she is? She has more credentials. She has combined more experience than the last 4 presidents combined.
Disagree.
Last 4. Now, you're not going to pass that bar exam by being stupid. You're not going to be attorney general by being stupid. Okay? And that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. You have to earn that. Tia, I'm gonna go to you because we're almost out of time. Tia, you had raised your hand. Go ahead, brother.
I have a lot of opinions on what you guys are talking about as far as DEI is concerned, but I don't want to not take advantage of having a historian on the show and not ask this question. We know that history is written by the conquerors, and in the past, people's history have been lost, or people have tried to erase other people's history in the past. But we also live in a age of computer technology. We're in the age of information, and what Trump seems to be trying to do is erase the history that he doesn't want talked about, and promote the history that he does want talked about. But in this day and age, should we be as worried as we are about an attempt to erase, we'll just say, Black history? I mean, can that even be pulled off at this point with all of the computer databases and whatnot in the world? Any opinion as a historian?
So
What do you think
I
about that?
worry not that it will be erased, but that it won't be communicated. So it may sit at the National Archives, it may sit in some library, but it isn't being taught.
Right.
It isn't being shared. And so I want to work at that interface where we have wonderful historical information now after the civil rights movement and how that did begin to change who became historians and what research got done and what stories got told, but it's not getting out. And I want to fight to make sure that it gets out. And that's what I think all of us need to continue to do. We
Yes.
need to push school boards. We need to push teachers. We happen to be, this has been Banned Books Week, in the rearview mirror. We just had Banned Books Week. How do we get those books back on the shelves, and how do we encourage kids to pick them up? And I worry a lot about that.
That's right. That's right. And Peter, I tell you, with a few minutes to go, I think that we are really, as a country, really hurting ourselves when you suppress that information, and because they, as far as I know, they still teach history in school. And when I was going to school, you couldn't graduate high school unless you passed history. And my concern is that if kids are taught and they have to learn the wrong history, then what are you teaching them? It makes no sense to me.
Right.
It makes absolutely no sense. History is the good, the bad, and the ugly, and all of it needs to be taught.
Yep.
In my opinion.
Yep.
In my opinion.
Tomorrow night, I'm
we all agree.
presenting a historical lecture to 45 apprentices in the Pipe Fitters Union.
Okay.
Last weekend, I did a workshop for 50 nurses in the Minnesota Nurses Association.
Okay.
So we got to find those niches where we're able to make this knowledge available. And then we got to get it where it's on the test, and they're going to be held accountable for knowing it.
Absolutely.
And at the moment, that orange-headed doofus in the White House is he's controlling what's on the test. And
Absolutely.
we got to push back. Now, next weekend, I hope you're all going to be out on the streets with me next weekend. No King's Day next Saturday. Get out there.
Right. And see, and then they're advertising this as Hate America Day. That is so wrong. That is so wrong on the surface. You hate America and hate Trump. The latter might be true, but we don't hate America.
Nope.
People are fighting for the sovereignty of America. And so I think that that's why these platforms like these are so important. So Peter,
Absolutely.
if you come back next Sunday, then we can continue this process. Please, if you check your calendar.
Or when
I will
he's
check my
available. He may
calendar.
not be
Right.
available next Sunday, but
Wait, wait,
whenever
hold
you're
on.
available, sir.
Hold on.
Yes.
He said yes, Mike. Okay.
No. I said yes.
Wonderful.
I'll check my calendar.
Okay, check your calendar. Okay. I was,
Oh, next Sunday is the 19th.
yes, sir.
I appear to be available. Yes.
Yeah,
sir.
absolutely. Absolutely. And
Okay.
Tia, if you would come back, Mike, I know you always here. And we're going to, I think this is extremely valuable because a lot of us will listen to whatever news outlet. And sometimes we already know that these news outlets are skewed to favor one side or the other. And Peter, that's why it's so important to have people who have dedicated their life's work to doing what you do to come on. And that way we can get the truth on what's happening. Because you're a reporter. You report the facts. You're not making stuff up, okay? And that's what I like about this. Tia, Mike, Peter, guys, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. I've enjoyed it. I've been excited all week to have you on. And so this gives me something else to be excited about this coming week, Peter, to have you on
Good.
again.
Great. Tierra, thank you. Mike, thank you. It's great to be
Been a
involved.
pleasure, Peter. Thank you
All
very
right, it
much.
was great being here. It was great being here.
Hey,
See you
thank you,
guys
sir.
later.
Stay well. All right.
right.
Thank you, William.
Bye-bye.
My
Take
pleasure.
care, all.
Guys, enjoy your Sunday. Hey, come back in about 58 minutes. It's going to be Sunday Night Gold with yours truly and the